Yeah, and that comes to a word that is known as being a psychopath, right? A psychopath is someone who he has an absence of basic empathy for other people, right? They can't empathize, and that's what you find amongst con artists, someone that cannot empathize with others, someone that cannot process feeling, someone that can see someone smiling, crying, and cannot feel what that person is feeling. So all of this about nonchalancy, borders around that person being a psychopath. And I think we have a lot of them on the pulpit. As much as we have them all around in different places, we have them in the workplace. I've talked about the people I met in 2016, and probably a few still there. They can't process what other people are going through. You have someone that's not been promoted for the last 13 years, and you can't feel what that person is feeling. You are dead to such feelings. You probably say to yourself, it's only business, it's not personal, but it's very personal. We're human beings. We're here to have a human experience. We're not spirit beings, right? So everything that every emotion that affects a human affects us in every place we find ourselves. In the home, you have the human experience. At work, you have the human experience. On the road, you have the human experience. In church, you do have the human experience. Don't deceive yourself. It's just it's to your whatever you want to call it. You're dealing with human beings, right? And when you do, and the church is about humans, right? So you need to know how to process the emotions of human if you're going to be a true pastor, not a devil on the pulpit, right? So, but you find people that con people are people that cannot process emotions. They don't feel for people. They are too much about themselves. I've been in places where the person that to preach that cannot smile is frowning because he thinks is bigger than God. He wants to deliver a message because of that. Is not is That's it's called a psychopath. You might think it's spiritual or whatever you think, but it's not. It's a psychological problem, right? And it's a psychological problem that you lack ability to process emotions of other people, and you're a psychopath. That's why you do that, So if you see someone that's not moved by what is moving everybody or what normal human beings are moved by, that's a possible con person, a swindler. That's someone you can't trust your soul, your journey to heaven, or even your journey down here with, because that person does not necessarily care about your feeling, does not care about your hurt, so you need to be watchful about that, right? So that's one key part, of you'll find, in someone that swindles, someone that plays the con game, or con artists, right? And really, that's what we call the dark triad, of which psychopathy is only one of them. The other two is called narcissivity or narcissism, right? And the other one is the Machiavellianism, we'll discuss both of them. Pretty much when you talk about someone that is a narcissist, is someone is that has an excessive interest in himself, right? Is overly conscious of himself, and the word is the excessive part of it. We all need to be to take care of ourselves. Self-love is something that's required, for us to be humans, right? Even the God says that we should love others as we love ourselves. So if you don't love yourself, you can't love other people. To love other people, you must love yourself. But we're talking about an excessive self-love. Don't forget we said, and everything must be done in the balance. When you're overdoing something, you're going to hell, right? Like the old quote says, the road to hell is paved with hard verbs, right? The road to hell is paved with hard verbs. So when you're excessively doing anything, well, you're excessively loving others or excessively loving yourself, you're going to hell. You missed it, right? Love is in a balance. Life is in a balance. Heaven is in a balance. Any excessive is hell, right? So you find someone that's overly interested in himself or herself, only cares about himself or herself, that is someone that's a potential, con artist, because that's a big attribute of someone that is a swindler. They're all there doing everything just to protect self, right? They couldn't be bothered about the other person. They use people to achieve their own end, and that's one word I've heard in the church also that is devilish. People talk about using people, right? In the church, oh, we can use him. We can use him. If you that's your mind. You're not partnering with God. You're partnering with the devil, right? You're doing a devil's work, not God's work, because God does not use people, right? God works with people. He doesn't use people. We don't use people. We use things. We don't use people, we use things. We don't use people, we use things. We love people, we walk with people, we use things. We don't use people because people have emotion. They have the ability to think, and they have a responsibility towards God to give account of their life. That if your church is not growing, it's because you are using people, right? You don't use people, you love people, you partner with people, right? You're not God. Even if you're God, you can't use people. God does not use people. God works with people. God partners with people. God does not do it alone. God doesn't want you to do it alone. God wants to work with you to partner together to do it. So he says, come and let's reason together. God doesn't say, go do that. God says, come and let's reason together. Come and let's reason together. I want you to buy into that which I want to do. I want you to be a part of what I am doing. Right? If God comes to you, wants you, he makes you to partner with what he's doing. If you don't partner with what God wants to do with and through you, you cannot do it. God doesn't even work that way anyway. So it says, if you be willing and obedient, right? Not just obedient. You're not a robot. Be willing and obedient. You can't be willing unless you understand that which God is calling you to do. So the same way for us also, if we are working with people, it's not about just telling them, go do this, go do this, go do this, without letting them understand and buy into the vision. As a leader, you sell the vision to the people. You are not, as a boss, a tyrant, you don't need to sell the vision. Just tell them to do it. But if you're a leader, if you're a pastor, if you're someone and under shepherd, under God, you will bring people to walk along with you, not you be a boss or a tyrant for them. If you're a tyrant, then you're a con artist, right? You don't even deserve to be in that position that you are in because you're a con, right? You're a con, you're a swindler, right? Someone in God's stead does not use people, right? Someone in God's stead works with people, sells the vision to them so that they can, of their own will, decide to follow and buy into the vision. You can't force people into heaven. Only the devil forces people to hell. God wants you to buy into the vision of heaven. Right. And that's one of the things they get wrong on the pulpit. I don't want to force people to heaven, force people to heaven. That's why you have a lot of sinners in the church. You can't even differentiate whether you're in church or something else, right? Because you have supposed Christians stealing from the offering box because we force people. They've not had an encounter with Jesus, but it will force them to come along, right? The only way to heaven is you got to have an encounter with Jesus. If you don't have an encounter with Jesus, just coming to church won't save you, right? To be one that God knows that you are his own, you must have an encounter with Jesus. So church is supposed to bring you to an encounter with Jesus. If you don't have an encounter with Jesus, you don't belong to him. Yes, you belong to your church, you have a church membership, but you don't belong to Jesus, right? But it's not even a Christian thing, just using it as an example, right? Because I'm a pastor, so that's the best example I have. So if you